Thank you, Winnie, and thank you all for joining us. I'm Peter Wallace. I'm Director of Learning Systems Assessment and Instructional Excellence at UW Continuum College, and more importantly for this, I am a doctoral student in the College of Education at the University of Washington, and I'm very happy to be joined by Jennifer White and Rachel Battersby, and excited to present with them about rapid open adoption. Jennifer, do you want to introduce yourself, and Rachel?
Sure. I'm Jennifer White. I'm a lecturer at University of Washington in the biology department. And prior to this past quarter, open education was a completely new concept for me.
Hi, I'm Rachel Battersby. I'm a student in Dr. White's class, and I got to work with both Dr. White and Peter, and so I'm excited.
And we have provided you with a worksheet. We hope you'll use it to take notes in this session. It is a Google Doc that is open to everyone. If you'd like to, please take a moment to either download a copy of it or to copy it to your own Google Drive so that you can have a private place to work. But I do like the idea of kind of everyone taking notes together and seeing each other's notes. So whatever works best for you. All right. Jennifer, you want to give the background on how you got started, as you said, not having worked with an open education before?
Right. So spring 2020 rolled around and everybody shifted to online learning. And I was tasked with teaching an upper division class in comparative endocrinology. And it started that the shift to online learning gave me what I considered to be a blank slate on what to do with this course. And on top of that, it was also my first time teaching the class. It was being handed down to me by a senior faculty who was retiring, so I had a limited slide deck and a ton of written material, like a course companion that went with the class. So it was my first time teaching the class ever. It was all of a sudden going to be taught remotely. And on top of that, it was in an area that's rather on the fringe of my formal expertise. I'm a wildlife ecologist by training, and so here I am teaching upper division endocrinology. And so all of that together led me to think of what is possibly going to be the best approach to have students to have the best learning gains in this course when we're suddenly all online. And so that led me to think, Peter, well, perhaps this would be one of the things that came across my desk in that flood of educational resources during the beginning of the pandemic was this idea of open educational resources and open pedagogy. So I decided in my first quarter to co-construct the syllabus with the students because I just didn't know what their needs were going to be that quarter. And on top of that, structure the entire class around co-creating a textbook, an online textbook, excuse me. So that was my idea. I got substantial buy-in from the students in the first quarter, mostly because I worked with them on the syllabus. Next slide. And so that first quarter in the spring of 2020, it was me and about 80 students. And then the second quarter, last summer, it was myself and a graduate student TA, and we had about 26 students, including Rachel. Those were the participants in the co-creation of the online textbook. And the form that it took was a series of assignments. Next slide. So the main way that I structured the course was to have breakout rooms be small working groups. And every day, students, Tuesdays and Thursdays, students would come to class. I would give a pretty limited, approximately 30-minute lecture on the entire chapter that was assigned for the day. And then they would go off into breakout rooms and work on a very small assigned section of text. And with that text, they could do a number of things that they chose on the fly for every given day. They could rewrite the section, produce an original figure for the textbook that would come down the road, find a really good web figure and write a caption for it, or write a multiple choice questions. And along the line, they also had independent writing assignments to do on topics or portions of the text of their choice. But the whole thing was geared around this idea that we were going to create a textbook together, and students really gravitated to that idea. In the second quarter, we layered on a couple other assignments that were very new to me, designed by Peter, and they were really exciting. There's a tagging exercise and a peer review exercise, and that's what we're going to talk about for the remainder of the talk.
Great, thank you, Dr. White. So I had been involved with various open education initiatives for quite a while at the University of Washington. I've been part of the library's open education resources committee. And one of the things I had kind of consistently seen come up is this question of, okay, that's great. I want to save students money on textbooks. I don't know where to get started. I don't know what to do next. And in my training in the College of Education, I became increasingly interested in kind of open pedagogy and read more in that and saw the value and possibility of bringing together open pedagogy with high structure active learning. So what assignments could we create that would really make it possible for teachers to easily adopt kind of an open pedagogy framework? So the research question that I came to through this really was, what are the key principles for assignments that we can design to achieve the learning objectives in a STEM course and at the same time co-construct an open educational resource? As Dr. White said, we did initial assignment designs. She credits me with a good bit of it, but she gave a lot of great input and really changed those designs for the better, particularly around tagging and peer review. We asked students to complete a mid-quarter survey about these designs. We got in-class reviews and feedback. We got the instructors' feedback, and we changed the assignments as we went through the course so that using design-based research, we could get closer and closer to designs that would really fit with that question, right? Designs that were easy for teachers to adopt, that students could really use to meet the learning objectives of the course and to co-create an open textbook. And then we ran a final survey with the students and a series of focus groups, which Rachel participated in. Here's a picture of an early iteration of the tagging design happening in Google Docs. We instructed students with specific phrases like unclear or core. You'll have the kind of the full assignment designs in the notes of the slides uploaded to the schedule. And as we went on, we added tags. And at the end, we were tagging in Hypothesis, in Pressbooks, with a few extra tags that the students asked us to add, particularly adding more detail to things like, do I think this is incorrect? Do I think it's unclear? And kind of a little bit more of why they think it's unclear. For the peer review assignment, we really focused on having students walk through a process where they were very similar to peer reviewing a peer-reviewed journal, right? So they're suggesting edits as they go through, and they're suggesting changes and updating materials in the original text. Again, that went through an iterative process to improve it. You can see here the later iteration in Pressbooks and again, Hypothesis. And it was really interesting to see the way that this theory interacted with the students' real experience in the course. So we'll turn it over to Rachel for some student feedback and her experience.
Yeah, so good afternoon. Like I said earlier, my name's Rachel, and I'm a senior at the University of Washington studying biophysiology. And I've had the privilege of working or being a student in Dr. White's endocrinology class, and I got to work with both Peter and Dr. White. And so I'm really excited to share my personal experience in the class, but just remember, I'm only one person, so these opinions don't necessarily apply to everyone. But overall, I had a really positive experience in this class. I loved it. It was really interesting. And it was different than my usual science classes that I've taken in the past, and that it focused primarily on group work, and it used in-depth assignments to test our knowledge of the subject matter rather than taking like high stakes exams. So can you believe that a 400 level biology class at the University of Washington didn't have any high stakes exams? I don't know about you, but to me it was great. It was music to my ears. And so, like I said, all my prior classes have mainly tested students' knowledge through exams, which personally I didn't really enjoy. Um, but by collaborating with my peers and working directly with the text, I felt as though I was able to better understand the material. And so personally, the working group products and the peer review exercises were the most helpful in solidifying my knowledge of the topic and the information. And so a quick refresher, the working group products were when we could find or create a figure, create a question, or rewrite part of the text. And then the peer review exercise is when we basically edited another group's working group product. And so these exercises were most beneficial to me as a student because in order to complete them successfully, I had to fully understand the material. And then by participating in the tagging exercises, I was able to get an overall understanding of that chapter and a general sense of what we were learning that week. And so once we had the foundation from the tagging exercise, my working group and I, we had to work together to understand like all the signaling pathways in depth and to create our working group product. And then by creating this in-depth question or figure pertaining to the text, the students and I had to reinforce and explain our understanding of the information. And so by having to explain this, it's synonymous to having to teach someone else the information, which really helped me solidifying that information and the content of the course. And then for the tagging exercises, they were also really useful to me as a student, but at times I was distracted from the text doing the tagging exercises, and I'd end up having to reread sections multiple times. And so I personally would have preferred an in-depth tagging assignment of a smaller section of text rather than doing an entire chapter at once. And so I noticed that when reading the entire chapter while I was tagging it, I tended to tag much more at the beginning of the chapter. And so I was really good on the initial content at the beginning of the chapter. But as I got onto page like 8 and 9 and 10, things kind of got a little fuzzy. But as I said earlier, it's a learning curve. And so it was really crucial to find the right balance between focusing on the text while doing the actual tagging exercise, but also focusing on the tagging exercise itself. And I believe that once the students find this balance, it will really help with learning the material, especially because the students are thinking critically while engaging with the text. And so, like I said earlier, this is just my perspective and my experience, but I am willing to chat with anyone who wants to know more about the student experience or has any question or have any questions about it. So don't hesitate to reach out to me.
Thank you, Rachel. As Rachel said, hers was just one experience in this class. And I can give through the mid-quarter and final surveys a lot more class feedback and a lot more detail of other people's experience. Overall, the results were extremely positive. Students really, really appreciated this change. They appreciated the open pedagogy work. They actually rated Dr. White's transition of this class as the best change in response to COVID-19 in the biology department in a biology department-wide survey. In the surveys that I did, they specifically called out appreciation for the small group work. In the mid-quarter survey, 77% said that the tagging exercise helped them read more closely. But that was balanced with kind of 45% saying that they were concerned about over focusing on specific parts of the text. So really, I think reflecting some of what Rachel said in her section. In the end of the quarter, question specifically about the tagging exercise, about 17% said that they learned a little bit more, and about 41% of the students said they learned a lot more through the tagging exercises than they would have if reading without tagging. So a pretty strong lean towards students saying that they learned more because of the tagging. And just to give you the fuller picture there, the vast majority of the rest said that they learned about the same. So there was no major negative effect. I believe one student said that they learned less due to the tagging than they would have otherwise. But to have 42% of your students say they learned a lot more in their reading is really, I think, a great outcome. Students said that they had great outcomes from each different kind of assignment. So they said that the small group work was an opportunity to dig into a particular section. A lot of this feedback comes especially from the focus groups. They said tagging helped them focus on the reading and really look at it through those different lenses of what is core and really important, what might be an error. They said that peer review really helped them see and use others' feedback. So they were seeing what others were contributing to the book and then evaluating those contributions themselves and getting others' feedback on their own contributions. And then the final project allowed them to give focused contributions to the whole book. So really a nice range of assignments that have different ways of interacting with an open textbook. Other comments that were made by students, and these kind of showed up again and again. These are comments that not just one student made, that I saw again and again as I was analyzing the focus groups, which included 9 different students. The students wanted more final project time and focus. They wanted more time to make a really concerted effort on a specific chunk of the text and to give feedback on that. That chance to contribute to something that future students could use was really motivating to them. One potential future iteration we might do based on that feedback is actually to give more cohesion across assignments so that students are working on a final project that they've been working on across the quarter through kind of tagging and more focused tagging and peer review. That said, of the 4, kind of peer review work had the least positive feedback from students. There was no major negative feedback. It just didn't come up as much in the students' comments as being something that was really useful or beneficial to them. And if you're looking for, okay, I want to pick up one of these and I'm not sure which one, I can't tell you which one you should pick up, but I can tell you which one we got the least positive feedback from students on. That said, you might have the idea of how to take peer review work to the next level and make a version of that assignment that's really going to work well for you. Out of the focus groups, the surveys, both surveys, the feedback from the instructors and the feedback in class, I really came to kind of 3 design principles that I feel are well supported by this body of design feedback. The first is to balance breadth with depth as you create assignments like this. The second is give time for deeper dives. And the third is to integrate student skills into group work. Now, obviously, these are in some amount of tension with each other. It is hard to balance breadth and depth and give time for deeper dives at the same time. So let's dig in just a little bit more on these design principles before we go to questions. Focus on generalization emerged as an interesting problem space for student creation of materials. Students were very aware that they wanted to understand the whole text, that they needed to understand the breadth of endocrinology in order to do well in their future careers, but they also wanted to give feedback and contribute to a more specific area within that. They often found, even in specific assignments like tagging, that they were struggling with, how do I have the time to really focus in on this chunk of the text, but also have the time to look at the big picture in the chapter? Very similarly, students wanted to see each other's feedback, but they only wanted to see it after they'd given their own feedback. And that kind of came up time and time again. We did an early iteration of a tagging exercise where students could see each other's feedback as they gave feedback, and they found that less useful than actually reading the full text, giving their own feedback, and then going and seeing what other students said about that chunk of text. Second design principle, give time for deeper dives. So students wanted the opportunity to spend a longer time with a particular section of the text. And I'm excited about potential future assignment designs that help do this, and that help do this in a really well-structured way, right? Not just, hey, go spend some time with this chunk of text, but here are steps you as a student might take to really learn this text in depth and to contribute to a future iteration that other students can use. And then the third design principle, integrate student skills into group work. We found in this course, and I think other researchers have found in in earlier classes in students' college careers that students come with a lot of expertise. They were quite good at seeing each other's expertise within participant groups, and they gave feedback on this in those focus groups saying, hey, I had a student who had knowledge in this specific area of endocrinology or has taken a neuroscience course before and has something to contribute to this chunk of the text or to this specific chapter. Others had background in English or in editing that was really useful to their small groups in editing. And so thinking about how to integrate the skills that students bring is also a really generative space to be thinking about these assignment designs as we move forward. I feel very lucky to say that Dr. White and I are talking about taking the next iteration, integrating all the lessons we've learned into future syllabus. And then we also need to do more to formalize the student intellectual property rights, kind of describe fully and get their full consent to share the open textbook that they create. And we're hoping to partner with Graphic Design Program to develop novel diagrams for the open textbook for the next iteration, because the packet that Dr. White inherited from a previous instructor has a lot of diagrams from a lot of places. We're going to end on this question. We have a good bit of time for questions. We're going to end though with, we want this to be useful to you. We want you to have something to take away. I have seen some people filling out the Google Doc. I really appreciate this, but do take a minute to see, how might you adopt or recommend adoption of assignments like this? What hurdles would you face? And what are possible solutions for those hurdles? Thank you. Dr. White?
We have a great question from the chat window. One of the things that I mentioned that why I think the working groups went well is that it seemed to me that the students were extra motivated by the real world goal of producing a textbook for the betterment of the academic and scientific community. And so I believe maybe somebody could speak up and ask the question again of, is that, can we replicate that experience? Do you mean outside of this type of structure?
Well, I am one of the people who asked the question, and I was thinking that once you've got the textbook out and you want to do it again, then what do you do?
Sure, I think fair. So I think one of the ideas that I've had for this project is that it is iterative, and I don't see an end product that becomes static after that, especially in a field that is constantly evolving and new publications coming out, rapidly evolving new information in endocrinology. It's never going to be a completed textbook. And so this really, in my mind, could be an iterative thing in perpetuity, kind of like Wikipedia, right?
Yeah, and I'll add to that I think one of the notes that we've seen is also that whether or not there's new information, there are always errors to correct. There are always better ways of saying things. One of the, there's another question about tag options. One of the things we focused on in those tag options was also how do you tag what is unclear and can be made more clear, right? That iterative process of continual improvement. And it looks like I know our time is up. I'm happy to hang out for afterward conversations. Winnie, I don't know if you have any closing things. All of our slides are uploaded to the schedule, including notes that include the whole text of the Canvas assignment. So if you want to know exactly what tags we gave, that's where to go.
Yeah, thank you so much for participating. We have reached the end of the session, so the recording will end.